Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today we welcome Jennifer Tillman. She's a family physician. Today's Kevin MD article is The Essence of Medicine, Genuine Connections in Practice. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Good to be here.
So let's start by briefly sharing your story and journey.
My background is that I'm from Long Island, New York originally. I grew up in Southern California, went to undergraduate at UC Davis, and then took a few years off and worked at the City of Hope in a cancer lab,
Hmm.
medical school at New York Medical College, and residency at East Tennessee State University. And then I spent 3 years in an FHQC in Wenatchee, Washington, and then came back to Davis, California to work at Kaiser for the last 25 years.
Wow. And you're a primary care physician. And as you know, there's a shortage of primary care physicians. Tell us, for those medical students who may be listening to you, what keeps you going in primary care?
That's a great question. And actually, I did retire about 9 months ago. But what kept me going all that time was something that I puzzled over for quite a while. And I'm one of those people while I'm driving to work is when I get all of the ideas and all of the realizations. I don't know why, but I do. So what I thought about the most was that no matter how efficient I was or productive I was, or how many patients I saw or diagnoses that I made, the most meaningful thing for me was that one-on-one interaction with the patient. And that was what gave me the most rewards in the long run.
Wonderful. And your Kevin MD article is titled The Essence of Medicine, Genuine Connections in Practice. For those who didn't get a chance to read your article, tell us what it's about.
It's about that question and looking back on my career and asking, why did I keep going when times were hard? And definitely in the beginning, I was discouraged from going into medicine. So the reason that I kept going at that point was that I was just passionate about being a doctor. But the reason I was passionate was because I wanted to learn everything I could about the human body. I didn't really see yet what would happen to me in terms of my experiences with patients. That came later. So over the years, I started to see that you can't know everything or learn everything, but you can give patients care and compassion. It's not quantifiable, but it's the most rewarding part for me.
And in terms of that reflection in your medical career, did the reality of medicine meet those expectations when you were a pre-medical and medical student?
As a pre-med and medical student, I felt overwhelmed. I felt like I could never learn everything I needed to know. And I really dwelled on that too much. And I think that's a common issue with medical students. They get worried and frightened that they can't learn everything they need to know in medicine. As I went along, I began to realize that we're all in the same boat as far as that goes. We have each other. Yeah.
And in your article, you mentioned that your pre-med advisor discouraged you actually to go into medicine. Why was that?
I didn't have the grades. I had a 3.2 GPA. I had, above average scores on my MCAT, but nothing stellar. And I was in a hard major. I was in a genetics major. They told me to switch to biological sciences because it was easier, but I liked the hard stuff.
Hmm.
So my grades in the hard stuff were B's and C's, and my grades in English, were A's. So I was just kind of backwards that way.
And did you have second thoughts about going to medicine, even though your advisors were discouraging you from that path?
Sure, I had some really difficult times where I thought about, is there anything else I can do with my life that's going to have meaning for me and it be a challenge for me? I thought about being a genetic counselor. I took the GRE to maybe apply and go to master's in genetic counseling, something like that. But I kept getting pulled back toward medicine.
So back then, when you were trying to find out if there was other paths for you, what kept pulling you back to medicine?
I'm not sure. I think it's just a lifelong desire to learn, to always be learning something new. I knew when I was 6 that I wanted to be a doctor.
Hmm.
I remember finding my mother's nursing books and looking at the anatomy drawings and just being enthralled by that. So I've just always felt driven to go in that direction.
So this is an example, of course, of resilience, and that resilience certainly grows as you go deeper into your medical career. So tell us about that role of resilience, how the fact that you overcome those obstacles, how you overcame those difficult courses, and you overcame the discouragement from your advisors. How did that shape the physician that you were?
In some ways, it was a positive thing to overcome these difficulties because I did have resilience, I did have grit, and that's what you need to get through medical school, especially 30 years ago when it was kind of there was hazing and there was pimping and it was kind of crazy.
Hmm.
Um, I had, we would be asked questions in front of a patient, and if you didn't know the answer, the attending would say, "Well, you just killed that patient because you didn't
Hmm.
know that." So I had the resilience to get through that. And that also gave me the strength to get through the difficulties of being a primary care physician and the lack of time and the overwhelming competing agendas of patients and doctors. But in the end, I think some of those skills that I had to survive as I'm retired now are less helpful to me. So it's made me realize that because I was so focused and driven, it's hard to have downtime and have
Hmm.
nothing planned. If my Google Calendar opens up today and it says nothing planned, I just like, what am I gonna do? You know.
So I hear that a lot from a lot of physicians that I talk to. Is that mindset of that ruling medical journey, right? Pre-medicine, medicine, residency, and then practicing medicine, and then having that empty Google Calendar is a little bit of a shock, right? You mentioned that you've been in primary care for 20 plus years. Tell us about the evolution of primary care. The time that you retired, how different was it from the time that you started?
When I started, it was, in a sense, more lovely in my memory. I did a preceptorship in the Appalachian Mountains with a family physician. And he would see two or three patients that he'd known for 20 years. And then he would go back to his office and read a journal. He had time to read journals during the
Wow.
day. And he would just write a few notes, handwritten, and that was it. He never seemed to be in a huge hurry, although I'm sure he had days where he was in a hurry. But the density of the work now is so different than it was back then. There's so much data coming at you
Hmm.
from all corners. And some of it is clinically relevant and a lot of it isn't. And you're constantly trying to weed out what's the most important thing that I can take care of today. So it's a lot of pressure.
And in terms of all that data that's coming at you and all the bureaucratic burdens, how did it affect your relationship with patients?
For a while, it really felt negative to me. I felt like I was using my time in the exam room as quick as I could so that I could get back to my computer and my in basket. And I thought, this is the upside down world. This is wrong.
Yeah.
This is not what I sacrificed for. So I started spending a little bit more time with patients. There isn't a lot of time, but the time that I spent, I was 120% with them and nothing else mattered in the world. We could be on the Titanic sinking and I wouldn't notice it. It was just me and the patient for that 15, 20 minutes. And that helped me a lot because it helped me remember what the reason was I was there. I wasn't there to refill medications and answer emails quickly and all of these things that are being tracked, you know.
How difficult was it for you to do that? As you know, I'm a primary care physician myself, and we're constantly distracted by the electronic medical records, by urgent patient messages, text messages. How did you maintain that focus with that patient in the exam room, despite everything else going around you in that clinic?
Well, I think part of it was that there were very few times when I would answer a text in the exam room
Hmm.
because most of those texts were not clinically urgent. So if it came, I would look down, see that it wasn't urgent, and say to the patient, sorry about that. They're just bothering me again. Just ignore it and try to get back on track. But yeah, it is difficult.
How did you stay there for 20 plus years? You hear from primary care doctors all the time about all these other distractions and how a lot of them are, in fact, leaving medicine, unfortunately. What kept
Yeah.
you going all those times despite everything else?
Part of it was my drive. I knew that if I could go until I was 60, I would have a good retirement. And I was a single parent for a good part of the time, so I needed that security. Part of it was my colleagues. I had really great people to work with,
Okay.
people that I could talk to, trust, people that I could sit down and have lunch with, chat with in the hallway when days were tough. The people you work with, it's everything. And we had pretty good specialty support. So I could call someone and just ask a quick question, a GI doc or a neurodoc or whatever, get what I needed and just get right back on with my day.
And you mentioned you've been retired for 9 months now. Do you miss medicine?
I do. I miss it a lot sometimes. I am still doing a little bit of medicine. I'm working for the Maven Project, and I work once in a while at a free clinic near me, precepting medical students. So I feel like I've got a little bit of that joy still from teaching and, nourishing the younger set, which I enjoy.
And do you see any interest from that younger set in terms of them going into primary care, perhaps?
Yes, the medical students I work with are interested in primary care. They are.
Now, for those pre-medical students, maybe who didn't get the grade that they wanted, the GPA wasn't as high as they would like, what kind of lessons can they learn just drawing from your own story and experience?
I think the lesson they learn is that you don't have to fit the mold to make it. I was not the pre-med student at UC Davis that had one of those pens with all the different colors that sat in the front row and took all these fancy notes and was the first in line to talk to the professor. I was not that aggressive pre-med student. So I thought that I'm not going to make it if I'm not like that. I felt like I was a failure because I got a B in a genetics class.
Hmm.
But it turns out that there's many pathways to get what you want if you really want it.
We're talking to Jennifer Tillman. She's a family physician. Today's Kevin MD article is The Essence of Medicine, Genuine Connections in Practice. Jennifer, let's end with some take-home messages that you'd like to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
My take-home message is to try to remember to focus on what gives you the most fulfillment in medicine and savor that. If you are with a patient who is showing you kindness, respect, trust, which is not as common as it used to be. So if you're with that patient, savor it, remember it, write it down, because we need that. We need that nourishment.
Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing your story, time, and insight. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Kevin.